Welcome to the weekly podcast where, I don't know, this is the weekly podcast where you get your long form weed ranting commentary about the weed news that goes on out there in America mostly. My name's Brian Strong. I'm just a regular old everyday guy. I'm not a news person. I'm not a really famous weed like commentator or news person or whatever those guys are. Who's this here? Oh yeah, we got Polly Washburn. She's a news writer for weed, for the Cannabis. She's been working there since December of 2016. I've read some of her work before. So it's not the busiest week in weed news, but a lot of shit has happened, and just at the end of it there. But way back before all that, we had Ann Coulter, right wing. The only thing I could really say to describe this lady is that she spends most of her energy just totally bashing liberal people. Anybody that is for freedom and liberty and, the Bill of Rights, and maybe even wanting to advance a more broader Bill of Rights, like have more things in the Bill of Rights, for example, universal health care and, livable wage kind of thing, like the New Deal. But, she hates them people. Anybody that's for that kind of stuff, she hates you. Legalizing marijuana, definitely not on her agenda. She hates you. She calls liberals literally like demons or demon-possessed. Don't even get her started on gay people or LGBT, anybody in that, anybody that doesn't adhere to her biblical right-wing cookie cutter mold is basically possessed by Satan and needs to be. I think her perfect world, it would be like you could round all them people up and put them on a island or just put them in California and set off the charges so the fault line goes off and it just floats off into the sea. I think that's kind of her goal. So she has some shitty things to say about weed. Are we surprised? Let's just go see how absurd this shit is. And then, where did this come from? I'm sorry. This was a debate with Anna Kasparian from TYT. And if you don't know who TYT is by now, they're the up-and-coming new so-called progressive journalists. You'd be hard-pressed to find too many progressives left hanging out there, so I would call them like liberal to corporate internet journalists. That's about all you could really say. But by and large, they're definitely on our side when it comes to marijuana, and I believe Anna, I love marijuana. So let's just read some of this. At the nonpartisan political panel marathon, Politicon, this weekend, columnist Ann Coulter made some remarkable claims about marijuana during a debate with Anna Kasparian. The topic turned to criminal justice and marijuana towards the end of a discussion featuring Coulter and Kasparian of the Young Turks, a progressive new media news outlet moderated by journalist Torre. Yes. I love marijuana, Kasparian said before making the point that despite similar usage rates, African Americans are arrested and prosecuted for weed at much higher rates than their white counterparts. Quote, I don't care if you're black, white, Asian, Latino, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't be prosecuted for marijuana possession. It's a gigantic waste of our resources, she added. Coulter rebutted both parts of Kasparian's argument with a set of inflammatory statements. Well, how could you possibly go against that? That's a pretty stand-up statement. Nobody should be prosecuted for marijuana, and it's, hey, Republican, Big government, hello, that's fucking huge. You're going to have a big-ass government apparatus of law enforcement just to bust people for marijuana? Give me a fucking break. I don't think anybody's for that. But somehow, let's see. Coulter said, there have been further studies where they actually drug test the person after asking, do you smoke pot? Or have you smoked pot in the last week? And it turns out there's a racial difference in telling the truth on, did you smoke pot? And I'm just trying to talk like her because this is how that fucking ignorant, like, Skeletor-looking bitch sounds when she talks. Anyway, blacks were about 10 times more likely to lie and say they hadn't smoked pot, she claimed. What? It was unclear what study Coulter was referring to, but she said she would email the study to Torrey later on. Come on, give me a break. But for real, what? You're telling me that, what, did they have a lie detector or some shit? Or they just like, hey, have you smoked pot in the last week? And everybody's like, nope, not me either. Nope. Okay, let's forget about it. Let's go take a piss test. Like, did they know they were going to have to take a piss test too? I don't understand that. But it seems impossible that anybody would lie about it unless they're just lying about it because they don't want to get in trouble. So that doesn't even make sense. It's not that there is a test like that. We know there's not. Coulter, you fucking lying ass weirdo. And Coulter just sucks. She totally sucks. There's nothing about her that's good. And if you think she's good, there's something wrong with you. I don't know. She's just like the black soul of right-wing vitriol. So, yeah, there you have my opinion of her. Fuck Ann Coulter. She can go fuck herself all day. I have no use for that lady. So, and a National Institute on Health study from 2008 showed more people self-reporting marijuana use, 15.4%, than tested positive in a hair test, 14.3%. That's funny. In terms of racial disparity on self-reporting, the study showed the opposite of what Coulter was claiming. Apparent overestimate of marijuana by self-report, i.e. self-report was positive and hair test was negative, was associated with being African American. In other words, they were like, yeah, I smoked weed. But the hair test said that they didn't smoke weed. That's kind of weird. Coulter added to her claims with, nobody goes to prison for possession. Well, I beg to differ there. And it's really sad because if you look at all the cases of people that are probably in there just because the last time they got caught doing something, it was possession and they got a mandatory minimum or whatever, the amount of weight they had gave them some kind of felony that's like over 10 years or whatever you're saying, like that person is probably a person of color and probably a black male, statistically speaking, almost always. So let's just look at this right here. When the crowd booed this statement, she responded, no, I know all you potheads are going to have trouble following what I'm going to say, but almost 90% of people in prison are in prison as a result of a plea bargain. What? No one gets arrested and tried for possession, but if they happen to have marijuana on them, that's what they plea it down to. No, you fucking moron. The reason that they plea it down to that is because that's what it was in the first place. You possess like a half ounce of weed, and they're going to give you a fucking manufacturing distribution charge along with it. Why? Because that's what they used to do. They probably still do in some places, but, I mean, obviously all you got to do is get a lawyer and fight that shit. But all in all, she's full of shit. They get overcharged, and then they plea it down to what it actually was. And in some cases, they plea it down to something more than what it was. Ann Coulter don't even try to understand what the fucking drug war is really about. All right? So she's like all the other right-wingers. All they do is sit around and fucking theorize about things. Oh, if we do this, this will happen. Or if we do this, this will happen. So don't do that. And it's just like they base their whole life on this fucking what-if shit. And their theories are never right. Like, oh, what if we give tax breaks to billionaires? Well, then the money will just trickle on down to the poor people. Every fucking philosophy that the so-called conservatives have ever had is just a big flop. Like personal responsibility. That's why Obamacare failed, because they try to make people pay for fucking health insurance. This is still failing, and it's still never going to work, guys. All right, so no one gets arrested and tried for possession, but if they happen to have a marijuana on them, that's what they plea it down. But if you're going to prison for that, you're going to prison because you held up a liquor store with a sawed-off shotgun and they found pot on you. So you're saying they pleaded off that fucking armed robbery down to marijuana? Hey, I got news for you, bitch. Motherfuckers are going to jail for marijuana. Spend more time in there than fuckers that go in there for armed robbery. That's a fact. In fact, I know a guy that, just got out of a long prison stint, and he was watching bank robbers coming and going like it was a fucking revolving door. Sometimes the same guy would come and go 2 times while he was still sitting there for weed. So you're really full of shit, and you're really pissing people off that are suffering the fucking consequences of the drug war with this just bullshit. Kasparian jumped in, citing her own TED Talks on the subject, How to Fix America's Broken Justice System. She summarized a portion of her talk on the privatization of prisons. In the 1980s, because of Republican leadership, we passed a bunch of draconian laws, specifically in regard to marijuana. And so our prison systems are, all of a sudden, we're just filled with people who got caught with possession of pot. Entrepreneurs see that there's some an entrepreneurial opportunity here, and so you have the emergence of the Corrections Corporations of America and Geo Group. Guess what they did? They're like, give us your nonviolent drug offenders and make us rich, so your tax dollars aren't really going to welfare recipients. They're going to private industries like private prisons, who have a vested interest in criminalize nonviolent individuals, particularly those who get caught with drugs. And, if you look at what drugs they get caught with, obviously marijuana is way far and above number one. Is the drug that they always get caught with. Not always, but percentage-wise, it's ridiculous. And furthermore, Ann Coulter, if you still don't fucking believe that people are going to jail and prison because of fucking cannabis possession, just go downtown to your local courthouse, look at the docket, it's still littered with that shit, even in states where marijuana is legal. Possession is still a fucking crime just about everywhere. Toyer then asked Coulter if marijuana should be legal. Of course she thinks that. No. You can legalize all the drugs you want once there isn't a welfare state, but no. What the fuck does that even mean? So if there's nobody left that's on welfare, then we can go ahead and legalize drugs. What is that even? That's stupid. You're basically saying that the reason people are on welfare is because they do drugs. I guess that's the only thing I can surmise out of that fucking crazy, goofy right-wing, I don't even know what the fuck that is. Marijuana makes people retarded. Whoa. I bite my tongue so hard to never use that word. Even so tempted to use it sometimes when talking about people like Ann Coulter. But I try my hardest to refrain, and if you see me using that word, please forgive me. I don't like that word. But I'm not gonna smoke her ass for using it. But it just doesn't surprise me, This is par for the course for somebody this ignorant, ill-informed, and even if they are smart and really do know what's going on for real with cannabis and how, the whole thing about everything she's saying being the exact opposite. It's just really terrible to reduce your level of rhetoric about somebody that smokes marijuana down to this. I mean, this is like what you say when you're losing an argument for sure. You always oh no, you're right side of the argument is not the right thing, so you're retarded, or it's a retarded fucking position because you don't have nothing else to say about it. Okay, marijuana makes people retarded, especially when they're young. What? Quote, we've got enough busboys. We're bringing in busboys by the million through our immigration policy. We do not need a country of busboys. We're destroying the country. I'm not even going to touch that garbage. That's just some jarbled up, fucking ridiculous Ann Coulter hate and vitriol spewing. Just, I want to call it racism or whatever. Nationalism. Let's just say it's nationalism. Oh, over the top nationalism. Whoa, slow down, man. So Kasparian responded to the same question with, absolutely, in fact, I wish, Ann Coulter, you would smoke a joint. She probably smokes joints all the time, man. It doesn't matter to these fucking people that take her position, whether they do or not, but I'm pretty sure she don't. There's always a reason why these people don't smoke weed. There's always somebody above them that looks down on them and like, you don't smoke weed, do you? It's like everybody's test on the side that don't smoke it to fucking stick it to everybody else. Cannabis has been a punching bag for conservative firebrand Coulter for several years, as you might have guessed. During an October 2015 Democratic presidential debate, Senator Bernie Sanders lamented that CEOs on Wall Street walk away from financial crimes while we are imprisoning or giving jail sentences to young people who are smoking marijuana. Good point, Bernie. That's why I was wearing this shirt. No, not really, but I just happen to be wearing this shirt. I don't know if you can see it. Bernie fucking Sanders. Coulter tweeted live while the debate was happening. I remember that shit. Sanders is a liar. There is not one person in prison simply for smoking marijuana. Can we pull that tweet up real quick? No. Yeah, we can. Maybe. Yay. Delete your account? Everybody's like, yeah. Yeah, this is, that's the kind of shit you get these days when you're anti-marijuana on the internet. It's usually not a very tenable position. Marijuana came up in the January 24 interview with CNN's Piers Morgan, during which Coulter derailed her personal woes with a pool cleaner she claimed was a marijuana user. Well, you can't get anything done with a pothead, she said. They can't perform any usual jobs. Well, let's just see if I can perform my usual job here of giving you the bias you deserve out there when it comes to cannabis and these really fucking stupid people. When you go to say the word retard or retarded, you could just like do that. Really stupid, ignorant. I mean, those words don't have enough sting to them sometimes, but you got to craft your sentence around the word ignorant to, give it the same punch. But those almost forbidden words these days. And right-wingers like Ann Coulter, they hate that the political discourse in this country should still have a certain level of decorum to them. I mean, I don't like to call it political correctness because that's just been stomped out and just we don't even know what it is anymore. People are so offended by just everything. You just got to be careful, no matter what you say. So yes, Miss Coulter, Mrs. Coulter, whatever the fuck, you can do your shit when you smoke your weed. If you can't clean a pool, the pool cleaner couldn't get the job done, man. I would have to recommend that you don't hire male prostitutes and pretend like they're pool cleaners or something. I don't know. There's just no way that that's possible. So she also broke out that old ass adage that we fucking hate. Back in 2009, she debated two of weed's most famous advocates, Cheech and Chong, on Fox News, responding to their plea to treat marijuana like alcohol. She said there are a lot of problems with alcohol, so we don't want two of them. Now, this old adage implies that somehow, if you legalize marijuana, or like Jeff Sessions says, put it in every drugstore on every corner or some shit, then somehow everybody in the fucking universe is going to start smoking, which to me would be cool. That would be great. Can we do that tomorrow? This world would be such a better place. I just seen a study today that says, yes, people that smoke marijuana can handle stressful situations better and are overall calmer even when they're not smoking. So I will remain calm when I say, Ann Coulter, you are a stupid, dumb motherfucking person. You don't even deserve to have a platform ever. And the only way you sell books is because there's a lot of people, unfortunately, like you out there that just hate people that like freedom. But anyway, yeah, if everywhere legalized weed tomorrow, or they just said prohibition's over, fuck that, do whatever you want with weed. No, it wouldn't be a bum rush for everybody in this whole country to start smoking weed, especially the dummy people like you who just like hate it no matter what. So we're not worried about that. You can go away. We're not really worried about that. And another thing I'm still not really worried about is this little twerp right here. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you names, Mr. Sessions. The Attorney General has been, we all know, he's been just grinding his axe, just trying to fucking get at the weed business. But what's going on, man? It just ain't working out for him at every turn. We had the, what used to be the Rohrabacher Fire Amendment. This time it was sponsored by Leahy. And, that's going to stop him from doing his medical marijuana crackdown. And I think they threw that veterans thing in on an appropriation situation, so that's going to have to get done. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to get voted on. They're going to be like, oh, there's no line item thing where you can take those things out, so I think that's good to go. I don't know. This is probably all in this article. I'm just speculating. But I like to do that because I've been reading about this shit all week, and I'm like, what's going on? Apparently, Sessions sent this letter out and to some governors in some states that have legalized marijuana, and he's like, yo, I don't know if you guys, if you're doing your enforcement right, man, we might have to come down there and crack some skulls. And it's like at every turn, this guy he needs to have somebody to just fuck with, is all I'm seeing with this Sessions guy. But when he's the one getting fucked with, like when Trump's on Twitter just hammering him off with keyboard strokes, he's just over there like cowering in the corner like, oh my God, what the fuck am I going to do? So that's kind of, I think that's what it is. He's like, he don't like that middle management shit, so he's trying to punch down and trying to, look like he's a tough guy and all this shit. He looked kind of cowardly when he backed off of the Trump thing. I don't know. I mean, Trump acts like that was a big deal. Like, man, why'd you do that, dude? Well, I mean, it was probably because he didn't want to have to fucking bust you, If he was loyal to you, you didn't want to fuck you over, Trump. I don't know. Trump's not the smartest guy in the world. I mean, these people that say Trump's playing some kind of 3,000-dimensional chess, maybe he is. We'll see. But currently, his current positions on just about everything is horse shit. And all the things that you thought were good, like marijuana positions, which seemed better than even Hillary at the time, because he was basically like, just the way he said it, like, oh, that should be left up to the states. And medical's good, right? Right? And everybody around him's like, yeah, fuck yeah, it is. I mean, in the heat of the moment and this and that, but he did it a few times, and he basically solidified his position there. And this guy comes along with his just axe to grind. Sessions, we are so sick of it. We're done with it. So now his task force, remember that? And I guess the way we found out about this, and I think I read this in Cannabis, some of the writers there were writing up about it, was that it leaked. Somebody leaked it, or it just kind of got out there what the task force recommendations were. And it was such a non-story that nobody really fucking cared. But this one, I mean, this is AP, this is where it kind of got summarized into this is starting to look like the end, the sweet, sweet end of the session's crackdown. So let's just read this shit. The betting was that the Law and Order Attorney General Jeff Sessions would come out against legalized marijuana industry with guns blazing. But the task force Sessions assembled to find the best legal strategy is giving him no ammunition, according to documents obtained by the Associated Press. I might have said that was a leak. I'm not sure about that, but man, there sure hasn't been a shortage of leaks from the Trump administration now, has there? The Task Force on Crime Reduction and Public Safety, a group of prosecutors and federal law enforcement officials, has come up with no new policy recommendations to advance the Attorney General's aggressively anti-marijuana views. The group's report largely reiterates the current Justice Department policy on marijuana. That's what Sessions told him to go find. It's like, find out about enforcement and marijuana, I think. It encourages officials to keep studying whether to change or rescind the Obama administration's more hands-off approach to enforcement. The stance that has allowed the nation experiment with legal pot to flourish. The report was not slated to be released publicly. The portions were obtained by AP. Sessions, who has assailed marijuana as comparable to heroin and blamed it for spikes in violence, has been promising to reconsider existing pot policy since he took office 6 months ago. His statements have sparked both support and worry across the political spectrum as a growing number of states have worked to legalize the drug. Threats of a federal crackdown have united liberals who object to the human costs of war on pot, and some conservatives who see it as a states' rights issue. Some advocates and members of Congress have feared that the task force recommendations would give Sessions a green light to begin dismantling what has become a sophisticated multi-million-dollar pot industry that helps fund schools, education programs, and law enforcement. But in the tepid nature of the recommendations signals just how difficult it would be to change course on pot. Some in law enforcement support a tougher approach, but a bipartisan group of senators in March urged Sessions to uphold existing marijuana policy. Others in Congress are seeking ways to protect and promote pot businesses. I would go farther to say that people are trying to put their name on flagship cannabis legislation in both houses just to solidify their position on the issue because it is a popular issue, and people are for legalization. 61%, according to a CBS poll, the most recent poll done. So back to the article. The vague recommendations may be intentional, reflecting an understanding that shutting down the entire industry is neither palatable nor possible, said John Hudak, our good old friend over at the Brookings Institution, who studies marijuana law and was interviewed by members of the task force. If they come out with a more progressive liberal policy, the Attorney General is just going to reject it. They need to convince the Attorney General that the recommendations are the best they can do without embarrassing the entire department by implementing a policy that fails. The task force suggestions are not final, and Sessions is in no way bound to them. The government still has plenty of ways it can punish weed-tolerant states, including raiding pot businesses and suing states where the drug is legal, a rare but quick path to compliance. The only one who could override a drastic move by Sessions is President Donald Trump, whose personal views on marijuana remain mostly unknown, and that's just because he never tweets about it. Of course, the Justice Department declined to comment. Rather than urging federal agents to shut down dispensaries and make mass arrests, the task force puts forth a more familiar approach. Its report says officials should continue to oppose rules that block the Justice Department from interfering with medical marijuana programs in states where it's allowed. Sessions wrote to members of Congress in May, asking them, unsuccessfully so far, to undo their protections. The Obama administration also unsuccessfully opposed those rules. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Nobody talks about that. The report suggests teaming with the Justice Department with Treasury officials to offer guidance to financial institutions, telling them to implement robust and money laundering programs to report suspicious transactions involving businesses in states where pot is legal. That is already required by federal law. Hello. I mean, when you make a deposit of $10,000, that sets off all kinds of shit, and you're definitely going to have some of these cash pot businesses, if whatever you want to call them, are very careful not to do that as it is, you know. And it tells officials to develop, quote, centralized guidance, tools, and data related to marijuana enforcement. 2 years after Government Accountability Office told the Justice Department it needs to better document how it's tracking the effects of marijuana legalization in the states. Most critically, and without offering direction, it says officials should evaluate whether to maintain, revise, or rescind a set of Obama-era memos that allowed states to legalize marijuana on the condition that officials act to keep it from migrating to places where it is still outlawed and out of the hands of criminal cartels and children. Any changes to the policy could impact the way pot legal states operate. The recommendations are not surprising because there's as much evidence that Sessions intends to maintain the system and help improve upon it as there is that he intends to roll it back, said Mason Tvert, who ran Colorado's legalization campaign. He pointed to Sessions' comment during a Senate confirmation hearing that while he opposed legalization, he understood the scarcity of federal resources and echoed the position of his Democratic predecessors. But in July, he sent letters to Colorado and Washington that stirred concern, asking how they would address reports they were not adequately regulating the drug. It remains unclear how much weight Sessions might have given recommendations. He said he has been relying on them to enact policy in other areas. Apart from pot, the task force is studying a list of criminal justice issues. The overall report's executive summary says its work continues and its recommendations do not comprehensively address every effort that the department is planning or currently undertaking to reduce violent crime. So, just like the Obama era, it comes down to a bullet list of priorities that these guys have. And for some reason, Session thinks that you could just override that in a budgetary way. We can, there's some kind of a magic never-ending treasure chest of gold to use against marijuana in the federal government's coffers. I'm sorry to tell you, fucking Sessions and all the others, Chris Christie's of the world. I mean, you know, I'm sorry to let you know this, but I'm gonna have to break it to you. You're just wasting your fucking money anyway, and no, there's not enough money for that. If you're really talking about fighting crime, you certainly shouldn't go after fucking states or people in states where marijuana is legal for any reason. It's just a waste of money, if nothing else. And here's one of the letters right here from the Attorney General of, Washington? Yes, Washington State. In response to a letter from U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions regarding Washington's marijuana regulations, Attorney General Bob Ferguson offered the following statement. I was disappointed by Attorney General Jeff Sessions' letter, which relies on incomplete, inaccurate, and out-of-date information on the status of Washington's marijuana regulations. I'm also disappointed that he has yet to accept my repeated invitations to meet in person to discuss this critical issue face-to-face. If he does accept, I look forward to providing him with a more complete picture of the robust regulatory program that exists in our state. Any action from the Department of Justice short of allowing our well-regulated, voter-approved system to continue is unacceptable. I will continue to defend the will of Washington voters. Yeah. I don't think it gets any more point blank than that, man. I don't see any reason why Sessions' response to that shouldn't just be like, okay. I think, when you're talking about these letters that Sessions put out to them saying, hey, what would you do if a report came back and just said, these guys aren't handling it. The marijuana's leaking out everywhere. Like it's like a bucket that someone shot with a 12 gauge with some bird shot. So, task force comes back saying, nah, we don't really like your attitude there about enforcement. Like we shouldn't worry about it. These guys got it covered. And maybe that Sessions preemptive letter to these guys was just like, it feels like bullying almost, or some kind of, it's like a threat almost, like, hey, let me know what you're going to do about that shit when you find out. That we're coming for you. I guess. I don't know. I mean, what does he expect the Attorney General to say? Well, of course, if they say that we're not handling ourselves properly, we're going to go crack some skulls and make some busts or something. I don't know. And keep in mind that this is all on the heels of Jeff Sessions giving states and local police the power to basically, in a raid, take all the property and see you later. Go tell a judge about why that wasn't bought with drug money, and this is like a massive theft being allowed. So, all right. Well, I've been kind of touching this story here and there, and it's finally came to a good conclusion. The NFL commissioner, Roger Goodall, is ready to research medical marijuana's safety and effectiveness. NFL commissioner said marijuana and its potential in treating football-related injuries is a medical issue that the league is interested in researching further. If pain management is something that medical marijuana can address responsibly, that's something that our medical community is evaluating. Goodall said Thursday at a forum in Broncos' Dove Valley headquarters. We just proposed to our union in the last month or so that we put some research money behind it to see how we could implement that if they can address pain management in an effective and safe fashion. That's something that I assume will get a lot of discussion, but hopefully it involves a lot of research and medical opinions that can help us make the best decisions. The collectively bargained substance abuse policy bans players from consuming marijuana. They're penalized if they test positive for more than 35 nanograms of THC per milliliter of urine. But many former and current athletes have advocated for the use of cannabinoids as alternative to potent painkillers. And back to the penalization, this is just ruining people's careers in some cases, but definitely putting a real dent in pocketbooks. Because as you might know, when you're an NFL player, according to the contracts, you have to play a game and then you get paid for that game. Like whatever you get paid for a year is divided into those games. And you get paid when you play a game. If you don't play the game you're supposed to be playing, you don't get paid. Now, you don't necessarily are on the roster, and there's other ways that contracts are written, but that's generally speaking, if you don't play the whole season, you don't get paid. And there's been 4 people that I know of in the off season so far that's gotten suspended for cannabis. That's not suspended, but for the whole year. The NFL Players Association established a pain management committee to address, among other issues, the issues of marijuana as a viable and potentially safer treatment for football-related injuries. Well, pain, they say. It's the head injuries alone, man. Come on. We know certain things about cannabinoids as far as head injuries go. There is studies on that. And basically what it says is if you bump your head even lightly, you can cause brain damage. But if you hit your head really hard, you're most likely to have a concussion. And if you have a concussion, you're really going to have some bad permanent damage. Could even cause all kinds of things down the road. But the immediate damage is what you really want to effectively treat right then and there with cannabinoids for the best outcome later on. That's what I gathered from the study. And I can't cite the study because I don't have it in front of me, but that's just something I remember about cannabis and head injuries. It's a couple years old. Earlier this week, the NFL wrote a letter to the NFL Players Association to work in tandem with the players in cannabis research. Along with the Washington Post, the NFL's letter to the union outlined multiple areas for potential research, including pain management for both acute and chronic conditions. At Thursday's forum at Dove Valley, Goodall was asked about studies on head injuries and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. I'm guessing that's from, I don't know. Most recently, researchers at Boston University examined the brains of 202 deceased football players and found that of 111 of played in the NFL, 110 of them had CTE. So I guess that's like chronic, when you're doing the head injuries on a regular basis over a period of time, starts having this other stuff. I should look into that. But it's a degenerative disease that is believed to be linked to repeated blows to the head. We appreciate the studies, and we actually not only appreciate them, we funded a lot of these studies. What we all need is more information, Goodall said. There is one thing that is clear among the medical community is that we have a lot more questions than we have answers. We need more research, and I think we have led the way on that front. We've not only led with research, we've led with rule changes to our game, we've led with awareness to the injuries, we've led on how we can develop new equipment that will make our game safer for our players. Now, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about on any of these fronts. Maybe he's talking about just the fact that they made some stiffer penalties for different hits and made other hits like illegal, like you could get ejected from the game and whatnot. So I'm not sure. But anyway, he touted the development of a new helmet that was born out of the league's health initiative with GE, the Vicious 01 helmet, that has garnered an array of positive reviews and skepticism. So I don't know. Again, he's talking about some other shit. So something really interesting popped up last week. It involved this committee that was grilling the national policy director of the drug policies in this country. His name is Baum. Let's just watch the video. It's a long video, so I might stop it, maybe not.
Director Baum, in case my mom is watching, I want to be really clear. I'm not advocating for the legalization of marijuana.
Sure.
I'll be very, very clear about that. However, I don't understand why it's a Schedule 1. It's certainly not treated as a inherently dangerous substance for which there is no medicinal value. It takes a tractor trailer full of marijuana to even trigger a mandatory minimum under our drug laws. So is there any appetite for researching whether or not it should remain a Schedule 1 drug?
Congressman, the administration doesn't have a position on that, but I'm happy to dialogue with your office. And let me just briefly say that we strongly support research on medical use of marijuana. And if there are obstacles that we see that prevent good research, we want to address those obstacles. Because if there are component elements of marijuana that could be put through the FDA process and turned into medicines that could help people in this country, we want to do that. So we do think there's some potential, and we support research on the subject.
Well, just so everyone's clear, methamphetamine is scheduled what?
I believe it's scheduled
2. Cocaine is scheduled what?
also 2.
Cocaine base is scheduled what? 2. So it is scheduled lower than marijuana. And again, you can schedule something and still not have it scheduled as a 1. And I would encourage the powers that be, whoever you need to consult with in the administration, to at least explore whether or not it's scheduled correctly.
That's a good point. But I think that, they would argue that they already did all do their little powwow and get together and talk about that, and they decided they're not going to change it. We've heard every one of these federal agencies echo that, and especially the Office of National Drug Control Policy, whose basic existence relies on cannabis being illegal, for sure. Like, all the other drug policies could be a no-brainer if cannabis was legal and it wasn't, like, pooled in with the methamphetamines and the cocaines and the heroines of the world. But, the point he just made, again, was all these drugs are Schedule II, and why? Because they've all had medicinal versions of them being used in the pharmacopoeia.
Without being perceived as advocating for legalization.
Understood.
With that, Mr. Connolly, I will give you a chance to...
Well, I'm sorry, Gowdy. Even if you bump it down to Schedule II, which would kind of suck in a way, but I don't think that would affect the anti-prohibition or legalization movements in America very much. So you could do that. You can move it to Schedule II. That's advocating for legalization in certain regards. So, you're not being honest with yourself when you say that you're not advocating legalization of marijuana. Let's be clear about that.
I'm reluctant to say whatever you want, but I'm going to give you a chance to, to conclude.
Let the Democrats speak.
I thank my friend, and I actually want to follow up, if I may, on what you just asked. So, the point being made here, in some ways, Mr. Baum, is if you, not you personally, if the government, federal government, on this subject, marijuana, and how dangerous it is, has no credibility because of the lack of serious empirical work, it threatens our whole drug policy's credibility. And you're seeing this happen in marijuana in the states. They're making decisions. Ms. Norton talked about 8 states, but there are over 25 states that have, in some fashion, including my home state of Virginia, liberalized their laws for medical reasons all the way to recreational reasons.
Or decriminalization. And let's be clear about what he's saying. In one regard, he's saying by keeping marijuana in Schedule I, you're making the whole drug war is discredited. Because you're saying that it's dangerous like heroin. People don't believe that right off the bat. It's dangerous like, you got all these things on Schedule I that really aren't even dangerous. But, let's just say heroin, for example, or crack cocaine or something that's on Schedule I. I think he just said base was Schedule II as well. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. What he's saying basically is since we have people popping up with legalization, decriminalization, and all this shit in 25 or more states right now, what makes you think that by having marijuana in Schedule 1, what makes you so sure that someone's not going to try this with something else, like methamphetamine or whatever's on Schedule 1, like heroin? Let's just say heroin. Oh, let's make heroin legal in all 50 states. Or 25 plus states. Let's decriminalize it here and do that and this. That's what he's saying. You might be thinking he's saying something good, like, oh, you know, this just discredits the whole drug war. Well, he's right, or you'd be right there, but you got to keep in mind that he's saying by treating marijuana so lightly as they legalize it and decriminalize it all over the country, you're opening Pandora's box yourself. If it's in Schedule 1. If you want to take that thing completely off of schedule, then other people wouldn't be trying to do it with the drugs that are on Schedule 1 or 2 already or whatever. I don't know. I probably lost everybody on that.
Reasons. I think you'd have to confess to the chairman's point. There was no empirical evidence to justify putting marijuana 50 years ago as a Schedule 1 drug. Who did that empirical evidence?
Nobody. There's
Sorry,
none.
can you repeat that? Who did what? Who made it Schedule 1?
There was no. I am asserting, and you can feel free to try to contradict. There was, in fact, no empirical evidence to justify putting marijuana ahead of the drugs the chairman just listed as a Schedule 1 drug 50 years ago. And I would. You brought up the need to have empirical research before we start rushing pell-mell to approve it for medical purposes, and I agree with you. But here's the problem. As I said in my opening statement, only one federal entity, NIDA, controls marijuana for legal purposes for experimentation, testing, and the like, research. And NIDA's mission is all about proving the harms of something. They've a priori determined the outcome of research. Nobody thinks NIDA is an objective, neutral place to go to look at the good, the bad, and the indifferent about marijuana.
We've seen the weed they used to test.
So if we're going to do what you suggest, we need to have a different entity with credibility where we're looking at objective evidence and science. And then we can determine, well, where does marijuana work? Mr. Humphreys made the point that there's a more lethal or stronger, more fortified versions of marijuana coming out that concern us.
Whoa. Did he just say lethal? I know he corrected himself right away, but that's a slip of the tongue that shouldn't even happen. And the only way we get rid of that is to further educate people like this guy and others. You know, marijuana is never lethal. It doesn't matter if you're talking about 99% pure THC or 99.999.
But we put a lot of people in jail, and we've treated this like it's more dangerous than cocaine and the other substance experiments, and it's had huge consequences based on very little scientific evidence.
All right, now there is where he says the other, it's the same statement, but this time he means because marijuana has been treated like it is some kind of a dangerous powder keg about to blow up in your face, and we arrest people willy-nilly for it, and it has stiff penalties just like every other drug on Schedule 1, well, we've caused a lot of damage. We've ruined a lot of lives. We've fucking spent too much money wasted on this effort, and it's all for naught. So he makes both points with the same statement.
I'm not arguing for the legalization either. I agree with my friend from South Carolina. I'm not going there. But neither can I justify the current policy of treating it as the world's most dangerous drug with its classification. You can feel free to respond, and I'm done.
Congressman, I understand the point that you're making. I would love to go with you in your district to talk to police chiefs and sheriffs. I think in reality on the street, police, sheriffs, they don't treat marijuana the way they treat heroin and fentanyl. So I think in practice...
Well, I should hope they don't, because heroin and fentanyl, by the time you got law enforcement showing up, normally the only treatment is Narcan or something to revive somebody or help them because they're dying or already could be dead or something. I mean, you're always talking about going at it from a law enforcement perspective. Like, what did he just say? We got to go talk to the cops and see how they do it in your district, And I'm going to tell you that they're going to say, oh, we treat marijuana differently. Yeah, you do, because you find marijuana in just about everywhere you look. And when you find it, you treat the situation differently, depending on who the person is. And what we've seen is people of color, especially, we've seen a lot of tickets and arrests. And it's like, yeah, and most of the time, depending on how much marijuana you have on you at the time, you could go to jail and have to wait to see a judge. And you might get arraigned and, well, you got to go to court. You got to bail out, or, you might sit in jail waiting to go to court. So it's always a law enforcement thing with the Office of National Drug Control Policy. We need to change that, I guess.
There is a prioritization of the most deadly drug threats.
I actually think that's his point, is that law enforcement doesn't, our sentencing scheme does not. Methamphetamine and marijuana are not treated the same from a sentencing standpoint, but yet marijuana is considered to be inherently dangerous with no medicinal value, therefore a Schedule I.
Well, I mean, even if meth was a Schedule I too and it got treated the same, which there is pretty stiff penalties for it and whatnot, but even if it had the same exact penalties for kind of like, variable weights that make sense, it would still be unfair, because we're talking about marijuana. It's completely harmless, and you can argue about it, whether it's addictive or not, all you want, but the fact that you got to argue whether it's addictive or not, and that a lot of good points can be made against that argument, proves to me that it's not something to worry about. It ain't like fucking heroin, where it's like, oh yeah, that's addictive as fuck, man. Anyway.
And it would just be helpful, again, to Mr. Connolly's point, for us to have some consistency, or at least be able to explain why certain drugs are Scheduled I and others are not. And, we can save that for another day. And again, that's coming from...
And that's a good point to make, too, because some of the other ones on there are like psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, I think. I think that got moved to Schedule I, and then I think I'm not sure if it's Schedule II or not. So, yeah, I don't know my schedules, like my ABCs, but, and I don't feel like going and Googling it right now either. So, I guess that's just another, like Gowdy here said, for another day, another discussion.
From two people that are not advocating for the legalization.
Sure you're not. I sure hope that you're just saying that to cover your ass when it comes time to go get reelected or whatever. Like you're gonna have some Tea Party or more extreme, because I thought you were a Tea Party kind of guy. Like someone more extreme than Trey Gowdy is gonna like run to the right of him and pull this shit out of the hat. Like, remember that time when you were stumping for legalizing marijuana at that hearing? I don't think you got to worry about that, Gowdy.
Just for some common sense in how it's scheduled. On behalf
Sure.
of all the members, I want to thank all of our witnesses for your expertise.
And thank you, Gowdy, and thank you, John Doe, for that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not usually out there kicking it with Trey Gowdy, but every once in a while he'll pull some gems out. All right, what are we looking at here? Harvard study, Big Pharma, U.S. Gov behind the opioid epidemic. Something I've been saying all along, man. But, my opinion is probably pretty dangerous these days. A new study from Harvard reveals how Big Pharma and the federal government have colluded to allow the current opioid epidemic in the United States. And here's that study in case for some reason you think I'm pulling some fake news on you because this is your newswire, which has been flagged as a fake news outlet by many other news outlets. So news outlets are what are they? They're just a bunch of people that somehow pull together the resources to bring you stories, and then you can argue whether they have their opinions saturated in with the story or if they're left wing or right wing or whatever. And then they got to figure out how they're going to pay for all that shit so they can keep doing it. Kind of like me. Eventually, I'm going to have to come to that crossroad. Do I want to do this full time, or do I want to just not care about it as much? I don't know. So, the study entitled "The Opioid Epidemic: Fixing a Broken Pharmaceutical Market" describes how the American public has been duped by the elites for more than 20 years. In this article, we argue that non-rigorous patenting standards and ineffectual policing of both fraudulent marketing and anti-competitive actions played an important role in launching and prolonging the opioid epidemic. We further show that these regulatory issues are not unique to prescription opioids, but rather are reflective of the wider pharmaceutical market. The freethoughtproject.com reports, researchers follow with a primer on the rise of the opioid prescriptions and how pain became the fifth vital sign. By the 1990s, doctors realized that chronic pain was often ignored, and pain management became a hot topic. Physicians were urged to make greater use of opioids, with experts in the field downplaying the potential for misuse and addiction, a view largely based on experience with morphine. But this was before OxyContin came along. Purdue Pharma recognized that this newfound view of the medical establishment could be exploited. Working to develop an improved synthetic opioid, their golden ticket was found with the extended-release oxycodone pill known as OxyContin, patented and approved by the FDA in 1995. However, Purdue's exclusive patent was based on corporate fraud and government ignorance. Purdue was able to patent extended-release oxycodone in the United States despite the fact that its constituent elements, the active ingredient oxycodone and the control-release system Contin, had been developed decades earlier. Oxycodone was used in a clinical practice in Germany as early as 1917 and was first introduced in the United States in 1939. Purdue's angle was to develop a controlled-release version of oxycodone, banking on its success with the patented MS Contin for morphine. And this is where the feds stepped in to help. The United States Patent and Trademark Office initially rejected Purdue's patent request for extended-release oxycodone, citing the combination as obvious. But Purdue responded with a statistical falsehood which the company knew was false, and the patent office made an about-face, granting the 20-year patent for OxyContin. Since then, the cozy relationship between Big Pharma and government has grown, with the pharma industry spending almost $1 billion in 10 years on lobbying federal and state governments and campaign contributions. As the Harvard study notes, low patenting standards and a history of tepid enforcement provided incentive for Purdue to embark on a massive fraudulent marketing campaign. With the guarantee of no competition provided by the government, Purdue spent obscene amounts of money getting Americans hooked on their newly patented product. Between 1996 and 2000, the company more than doubled its U.S. marketing team. In 2001, Purdue paid $40 million in bonuses tied to extended-release OxyContin. Purdue also invested heavily on analytics, developing a database to identify high-volume prescriptions and pharmacies to help focus their marketing resources. Patients were offered starter coupons for free initial supply of extended-release oxycodone, 34,000 of which were redeemed by 2001. Finally, Purdue hosted 40 all-expense-paid pain management and speaker training conferences at lavish resorts. Over 5,000 clinicians attended, receiving toys, fishing hats, and compact discs while listening to sales representatives tout the alleged benefits of extended-release oxycodone. Purdue elevated the stakes, spending an estimated 6 to 12 times more promoting extended-release oxycodone than its competitor Janssen spent marketing a rival opioid. Purdue's effort paid off. Between 1996 and 2001, extended-release oxycodone generated $2.8 billion in sales. From 2008 to 2014, annual sales exceeded $2 billion. Gets worse. As a patent expiration for OxyContin approached, Purdue developed an abuse deterrent formulation of the drug for which FDA granted a patent in 2010. Not satisfied with a simple new patent, Purdue fixed a citizen petition asking the FDA to refuse to accept generic versions of the original extended-release oxycodone formulation on safety grounds. Incredibly, FDA also granted this to Purdue, effectively preventing the marketing of low-cost therapeutically equivalent products that might undercut Purdue's incentive to continue widely promote its new abuse deterrent formulations, basically saying no generics. By the way, the abuse deterrent OxyContin doesn't really deter addicts. It has fueled the explosive heroin epidemic as addicts seek out cheaper black market alternatives. But Purdue is content making its billions off the patented drug. While thousands of Americans die under a campaign of deception and greed, official Washington pretend to care with the occasional fine levied against pharma companies, including for false marketing by Purdue. Nobody ever goes to jail. No one in top management is ever held to account. The person in personhood conveniently disappear when corporations get in trouble, and the fines, mere pocket change compared to the revenues already made from the drugs involved. Rather than deterring fraudulent marketing, penalties simply become costs of doing business. The Harvard study provides much more insight into the fraudulent marketing practice of Big Pharma, the patenting schemes enabled by the federal government, how generic drugs are routinely stifled, and possible ways to address this injustice. Some of the more sinister effects of the system include hard switches which force patients to go from one costly patented drug to another instead of generics, the use of citizen petitions by pharma corporations to slow generic drugs and keep prices high is a particularly insidious scheme. The study notes that today over 4 million Americans misuse opioids each month at a societal cost of $80 billion annually. 300 million prescriptions were written in 2015 in the U.S., which has a population of 323 million. This is a reflection in the fact that 80% of the world's opioids are consumed in the U.S., which has a 5% of the world's population. The misuse of opioids is not a simple issue, and personal choice is of course involved, but above the numbers point to something much bigger going on. As the Harvard study confirms, Big Pharma has exploited the enormous addiction potential of opioids to prey upon the American populace for decades. Made possible by the federal government with blatant disregard for the well-being of citizens. I don't see anything fake about that news. And if you don't believe the study, once again, here's the link. I'll put it down in the description. One more word on that. That's kind of how I've always felt about Big Pharma, that they don't want things like medical marijuana legal because it actually works. They peddle in stuff that just, works for a minute or kind of treats the symptoms and don't really get at the root cause of why the symptoms are there. And then they squish that, and then they, dole out their medicine, and then you can basically charge whatever they want for it. And they know people are getting addicted to the opioids and shamelessly getting rich off it. If you don't believe it, just read stories about incest therapeutics. So, again, the leaked stuff keeps springing out of the White House. Like I said, it feels like somebody just shot a big tower, a water tower with a BB gun and popped a hole in it. And another one sprang out the side where the rivet popped out. I mean, this is like a cartoon. This time, in the transcript of the Mexican president phone call, Trump referred to New Hampshire as a drug-infested den. Oh my goodness. He said it was disgusting and wrong and an example of an appalling hate-filled rhetoric as the State Department lawmakers and Republican governors all came together to basically crucify Trump about this. Trump's claim was contained in a White House transcript of the call with Enrique Pena Nieto on 27th of January, which was published by the Washington Post on Thursday. We will have the drug lords in Mexico that are knocking the hell out of our country, Trump says. They are sending drugs to Chicago, Los Angeles, and to New York. Up in New Hampshire, I won New Hampshire because New Hampshire is a drug-infested den. It is coming from the southern border. Trump won New Hampshire in the primary, but did not win in the general election. Hillary was declared the winner of a tight race 6 days after the November ballot. On Thursday, state lawmakers condemned Trump's remark over its tone and called it inaccurate. New Hampshire does have a serious problem with drugs, they said, but with opioid addiction of the kind that is affecting a number of states rather than over narcotics smuggled in from abroad. Using the president's favorite medium, Twitter, Senator Maggie Hassan said Trump's remark was disgusting, adding, as he knows, New Hampshire and states across America have a substance misuse crisis. Quote, to date, Trump has proposed policies that would severely set back our efforts to combat this devastating epidemic. Instead of insulting people in the throes of an addiction, Trump needs to work across party lines to actually stem the tide of the crisis. All right, then the rest of the article just kind of goes through a bunch of other people's tweets and stuff, and I'm not going to go through them all. But yeah, there you have it. Trump just don't really know what's going on. Kind of clumsily bull trying to tiptoe through the, art gallery without destroying a bunch of shit. And in other news, cannabis grower buys California town to build pot-friendly outpost. On the lighter side of things, American Green Incorporated, maker of cannabis products, has taken an unusual step to attract new customers as it capitalizes on California's legalizing of marijuana. It's buying an entire town. The company acquired the tiny burg of Nipton, California, for about $5 million. Plans to invest as much as $2.5 million over the next 18 months to create a pot-friendly tourist destination. So what you should do is you should just get a bunch of roller coasters and shit, and maybe have a few stages set up for a festival that never ends. The purchase includes 120 acres of land with a general store, a hotel, a school building, and mineral baths. Sounds pretty rustic. American Green, based in Tempe, Arizona, will use existing structures and build new ones powered by renewable energy to revitalize the town, said project manager Stephen Sharon. Ideally, the outpost will spawn imitators, he said. We thought that showing what there was a viable means of having a cannabis-friendly municipality and further making it energy independent could be a way of really inspiring folks to say, we can do that here, right? Good luck, man, and this guy better watch out. With pot now legalized for recreational and medical use in California, Nevada, and 6 other states, 1 in 5 American adults can consume the formerly taboo plant as they please. That's created an opportunity for companies to try to make cannabis a more mainstream product. Nipton, with a population of about 20 people, is situated in California's San Bernardino County next to the Mojave National Preserve and just across the border from Nevada. It's about 3 hours by car from LA and just about an hour from Vegas. Temperatures soar to more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer months. Ooh. The former mining town already draws visitors due to its location on the road and railway between the major cities, Sharon said. Or Sharon? He sees curiosity about weed drawing more. Small towns have mixed reactions to marijuana, even in states where it's legal. That's why American Green decided to take on the project. The company wants to demonstrate the benefits cannabis can provide. American Green plans to include a new facility to manufacture water infused with CBD, the cannabis compound that is typically associated with reducing pain and inflammation. The new Nipton will also have a production site for edible marijuana products, retail stores, and artists in residence programs. So that's all really cool sounding, but yep, you know, a little bit revolutionary. You don't want Big Pharma finding out about that CBD water. And over in Maryland, more of this. For the second time in 2 weeks, body camera footage from Baltimore Police Department appears to show officers planting drug evidence at an arrest scene. Footage from 3 officers provided by a Baltimore defense attorney and compiled by Vice News appears to show police searching a vehicle without finding any drugs and later suddenly discovering the evidence. After seeing the video, prosecutors dropped all charges on Monday against the woman arrested during the stop. Shamir Collins, the Baltimore Sun, reported, quote, it appears in the video that the drugs may have been placed there by the cover officer, said Collins' attorney John Isley, who released the footage Tuesday. But the videos speak for themselves.
Let me know when you're ready.
Did anybody check this compartment here yet? Well, here you go.
Well, here you go. That didn't even sound that authentic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh my God, I knew it. That's why they were freaking out.
That's the weed smell right there,
That's
too.
why they were freaking out.
Oh, these are like little 5s.
all right.
Yeah.
She had a 19.5 pocket.
See, this
These little
is,
small bags, and here's some dirt.
Hey, I'm gonna go hot just for this recovery and everything.
Yeah.
But I've been off because I wasn't obviously hiding. So.
So he gets our
couple of thoughts real quick before we finish reading this. Wow. It's just so weird to have an inside window to see these officers just acting like total actors because they know they're on camera. Let's do that again. Let's go back to here again.
Well, here you go. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, I knew it. That's why they were freaking out.
That's the weed smell right there,
That's
too.
why they were freaking out.
Oh, these are like little 5s.
That's why they were freaking out. No, they were freaking out because they were afraid for their lives. Every time you guys pull somebody over, people are afraid for their lives. Baltimore Police Department did not immediately respond after a request for comment. Baltimore Police pulled Collins over on November 29, 2016 on suspicion that she was engaged in a drug deal with her passenger. That just sounds suspicious already. I mean, their story. Timeline of what appears to happen on the body camera footage provided by Vice News follows. I'm not going to read all that. Less than 2 weeks ago, the Baltimore Public Defender's Office released body camera footage from a January drug arrest that appeared to show another Baltimore police officer plant a bag of heroin before making an arrest. Police officials contend that the officer was recreating the discovery with his camera on for evidence to be used in court. One of the officers involved was suspended and the other two were placed on administrative duty. No, I don't know, man. That's that thin blue line, man. They're just, hey, look, he was recreating that. I don't believe it for 1 minute. I thought, from what I seen, that was totally planted evidence. Now you have another case of it, so that doesn't help your case. But, it's like the two guys that were standing there watching them plant the evidence, I don't understand how they still have badges, or how anybody still have badges that were caught planting evidence. That's got to be the most dishonest, most overtly corrupt, sinister, and just, that's like we always say, the people that want to legalize marijuana, it was made illegal because of racism. And then later on, Nixon underscored that when he said basically that we need to use this to go after our political enemies, specifically the Black Panthers and basically black activists in general, and the Vietnam War protesters, a.k.a. the hippies. So, yeah, this is unbelievable mistrust between the public and the people that are policing them. When they've seen this happen twice in a row like that, this back to back, it's like the two biggest stories that you've seen coming out of Baltimore, and it was just like boom, boom. Look at this. The cops are planting evidence left and right. And it just immediately, the first thing you think of is how many times did they do this before? Is it how common is it, and how many people are in prison right now because of this? And I mean, whatever I've heard the defense on the underground, under the table, what people say. They're like, well, the cops know who the drug addicts are. They know who's out there doing what, and they're just strategically cleaning up the streets because the court systems don't work. The criminal justice system is corrupt, and so they got their own viewpoint on this. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, the 3 officers involved in the first video were slated to testify in 123 cases. State's Attorney for Baltimore, Marilyn Mosby, whose tough position on police misconduct in the wake of Freddie Gray's 2015 death in police custody earned her a national spotlight, said that 41 cases have since been dropped, 55 are under review, and the remainder can proceed due to the existence of evidence not linked to the officers, according to the New York Times. But this is calling into question more than just these officers, because we've seen it. There's the officers involved in the first video, and then there's these other officers involved in this video. And I don't know how many officers are involved in this video. Quite a bit.
10-4 is long distance. Let me know when you're ready.
I don't know, there's like a couple cops in there searching it, and these guys are here. 1, 2,
here you go.
3, there. There you go. The guy with the camera, that's 4.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just don't get it, man. You got that's 7 cops that we've seen on video that are either involved with the directly planting the evidence or are standing there just letting it happen and will go ahead and testify in court later that they found the drugs. You know, that's why the drug war's got to stop, man. This is not right. And when you talk about like Duterte, his drug war, this is where people are just killing people. Like, oh, plant drugs on them if you want to kill them. Kill your political enemies, say they're drug dealers. The credibility of those officers have been directly called into question, Mosby said Friday. Thank you, Mosby. And of the latest video, Baltimore City Police Commissioner Kevin Davis released a statement that under no circumstances are officers to recreate evidence discoveries. Thank you. Davis also said that officers' body cameras are to remain activated at all times. If you must deactivate your body-worn camera during an incident, merely explain the reasoning on camera. For example, if an officer needs to protect the identity of a witness who wishes to remain anonymous. Okay. And I don't know what to really say about that. It's just scary. It makes you feel like this war on drugs it's a war on people, man. That's all it is. It's a war on the people. All right, local news. Some people that are the activists in Michigan here file a petition with the city to let voters decide marijuana licensing issues. In Gaylord, Michigan, activists and marijuana dispensary owners turned in 300 signatures Monday afternoon calling for a ballot measure opting in to the state's new medical marijuana licensing laws. Like I was saying in a previous video, all over the state, this is happening. People are trying to get their towns or municipality, whether it be a township or a city or whatever, to get on board with the new regulations coming up. Petition was turned in the day before all petitions for municipal ballot issues were due for the November 7th election. Marijuana activist and former Cloud 45 dispensary owner Chad Moreau said he originally had planned to pick up the petition from Lansing last week. Those plans were laid to waste when his dispensary and 4 others were raided the night of July 24th. He said he was in jail until the end of the week, giving the activists just 48 hours to complete the petitions. Cody Bigelow of Cloud 45 said at least 200 of the signatures were valid by the group's count. On Monday, he said the group needed 160 for the measure to land on the November ballot. According to City Clerk Kim Auray, petitions need 321 valid signatures to make the ballot, 1/10 of the voters of the city votes cast in the last city election. Ari said the process of validating each signature could take a week, so she could not yet comment on whether the petition has the required number. Once all the signatures are counted, she will inform the petitioners about the result. Bigelow and Kevin McCarthy, the 33-year-old Gaylord man who has had rheumatoid arthritis from childhood, handed the petitions to Ari with his wheelchair at about 4:20 p.m. Monday. The only relief I get is from medical marijuana, McCarthy said. I don't like taking synthetic pills that will mess up my insides. Because he switched to medical marijuana, McCarthy said he was taking more than 20 pills a day, sometimes multiple doses per day, plus weekly and bi-weekly injections. Quote, once I switched to medical marijuana, all that stuff went away. I don't need it anymore. The proposal calls for background checks on all those hoping to open a new dispensary and a public hearing before any license is granted at the local level, and places taxes on marijuana sold. And keep in mind, in case you don't know, wherever you're at, we're talking about Michigan here, and we're talking about medical marijuana. That is what is going to be taxed by the state of Michigan. So if you open a dispensary, you're going to get taxed. And if you're buying weed at a dispensary, it will be taxed. Quote, I've had a lot of people calling me crying. They're in hospitals and can't find the medicine they need. The city gets bad publicity in my eyes, Bigelow said. Activists have been calling on city officials to opt into the new law for months now. The law, which was signed by Governor Snyder in September of 2016, allows municipalities to set certain regulations on dispensaries within their boundaries or opt out of granting licenses completely. Although Gaylord enacted an amendment to its zoning ordinance in 2016 allowing dispensaries to operate in C1 and C2 commercial districts, officials have repeatedly said they will not move forward with an ordinance opting into the new licensing system by December, when dispensaries can begin filling licensing applications with the state. The activists hope that this proposal will circumvent that delay by putting the decision in the hand of voters instead. Now, if they're anything like my municipality, they basically said, "Nah, we're not going to do it, but we're open to it. We're going to keep an open mind." And I guess that's so that they had these people come to their town hall meetings to discuss it, and a lot of people that were against it were just like, this is going to unleash the 7 seals of heaven. Armageddon is going to rain down on us. I mean, they basically said, all these bad things about what marijuana businesses could bring to the area, or give the town the reputation of being a pot haven or whatever. Place where the cannabis cup is at. Twice a year, by the way. Yeah, I just found out that the Cannabis Cup will be returning to my town on September 9th through 10th. I think that's the dates. Not positive. But anyway. Alright, hold on. I never pasted that. Yep. The activists hope the proposal will circumvent the delay by putting the decision in the hand of voters instead. If the residents vote yes on the measure, it will become active 45 days from Election Day. Jamie Lowell, an activist with Michigan medical marijuana law experts, said other cities in Michigan, like Detroit and Lansing, will also have measures on their ballots on opting into the law, and said a ballot initiative was a viable legal alternative to an ordinance passed by a city council. However, he did say that once the city does opt in, zoning regulations on dispensaries might require a council vote. I think we're probably going to see that this is a challenge, that a decision is going to have to be made on that, he said. Frank James, one of the owners of All West Natural Health, one of the dispensaries that was raided, said the current state of affairs in Michigan and in Gaylord makes it dangerous for dispensary owners and medical marijuana card holders to live their lives without the fear of repercussions. Quote, you want to know who's in the states going to protect us? Nobody, including the media. Nobody's out there to protect us. And the laws aren't out there to protect us either, as we've seen with the medical marijuana law that we already have. The new law doesn't really protect anybody that wasn't protected before. And yeah, it's just bad all around situation in Michigan right now. With the raids going on left and right, top to bottom, all over the state. We're getting the feeling now that, in fact, they're trying to shut it down, man. They're trying to shut down as many dispensaries, and they've been doing it since 2000, we'll say, 14. And before that, they were too, but that's when it really got ramped up. And that's when the raids started in Detroit again. And it's been quite a ride since then. So my question is who do you really plan on is going to run all these marijuana businesses, the state is going to sanction anyway. Speaking of Detroit, there's, the situation there was the raids that's been going on because of the ordinance that basically created zones where you could actually have marijuana businesses. There was barely any of them in the whole city. And it was based on this idea that you couldn't have it within a certain distance of a liquor store. So there's a petition going around. Let's just go ahead and read it. Let pot shops, I'm so sick of the language they use. Pot, every single article I read today, I think, uses the word pot. How ridiculous. So pot shops pop up near Detroit parks, child care centers. This is kind of like a scary one. Like, hey, whoa. You don't want that, do you? An initiative to amend Detroit's medical marijuana ordinance to allow dispensaries to operate near liquor stores, child care centers, and parks could appear on the November ballot after a group behind the effort submitted thousands of signatures backing the measure. Citizens for Sensible Cannabis spokesman Jonathan Barlow confirmed his group submitted petitions late last month seeking to amend Chapter 24 of the city's code. Elections Director Daniel Baxter said the group met the threshold of required signatures and his department has since turned the initiative over to the Detroit City Council, which is expected to consider it Tuesday. Ooh, I don't think I got the update on this. Yeah, I probably could have got an update on this. This is a pretty old story. The council is also expected to receive an update on the city's medical marijuana efforts, according to its Tuesday meeting agenda. Baxter said the council has to consider the initiative before it's placed on the ballot because it's part of the initiative petition process. It's now in their hands, Baxter says. If they choose not to act on it, it goes back to the Election Commission to determine whether it meets all the legal requirements, and if it does, it goes on the ballot in November. Baxter said council members have 60 days to act on the initiative, and if they also have the right to choose to reject it and place something on the ballot themselves. The effort to amend the ordinance comes a year after it took effect on March 1st of 2016. According to a copy of the petition, the amendment would also allow dispensaries to be located closer to churches and to each other and would give dispensaries an additional hour to operate. Currently, they must close at 8 p.m. New rules will allow them to close at 9 p.m. Wow, talk about heavily regulated. They even tell you how late you can be open. Richard Clement, top aide and council president pro tem George Cushingberry Jr., said an array of individuals are backing the measure, including former dispensary owners who were shut down, owners in the process of getting closed, and those who are planning to reopen in the city. Barlow declined to say who's backing the initiative, but said more information on the effort is forthcoming. Barlow said his organization has submitted petitions to amend Chapter 61 of the city's code to allow growers to and secure transporters to open within the city's industrial districts. It would also allow processors, provisioning centers, and safety compliance facilities to be permitted in additional businesses and industrial districts. But, Baxter said, the initiative to amend Chapter 61 will not appear on the ballot. Based upon what we've seen thus far, this one to amend Chapter 61 is not valid, Baxter said. The State Zoning and Enabling Act precludes local jurisdictions from rezoning through ballot initiatives, meaning you can't circulate. The only entity that has that authority is City Council. Well, la-dee-da. Barlow said his organization is seeking further clarification. Detroit Corporation Counsel Melvin Butch Hollowell previously told the Free Press that 283 dispensaries were identified in the city last year as operating illegally. According to the city's website, 172 shops have been shut down. None of them were operating lawfully, Hollowell said. At the time, I sent letters to each of them indicating that unless you have have a fully licensed facility, you are operating at your own risk. Hollowell also said at the time that the additional 51 were in the pipeline to be closed. That would bring the closures up to 218 and a step closer to the goal laid out by the city officials to only have 50 of them citywide. Hallowell declined to comment on the November initiative. Councilman James Tate, who originally introduced the ordinance in 2015, said there were other things he wanted to include that were more strict, but believes that what's in place now works and has been successful. There hasn't been any proof or display of proof that shows that it's not working properly, Tate said. Anytime you try to limit conversation about what's happening in people's neighborhoods, that's never good, and I'm not going to be in favor of that. Based on what I'm hearing, I would be in opposition to, and more likely, vocal opposition. Huh? Tate says he introduced the ordinance 2 years ago because he believed the city became oversaturated with dispensaries. You would have 4 or 5 on one corner, Tate recalled. Wow, man, how many roads have 5 corners? There's nothing we have in the city of Detroit that's oversaturated or overpopulated. It's whether it's a CVS or McDonald's. If you look at dispensaries, many of them are not owned by residents of the city of Detroit. It's a multi-pronged issue, but if someone feels like it's not the best move on their behalf, they have the right to utilize the process of law whichever way they feel is right. Okay, whatever, mumbo jumbo. Like, for real, Detroit has a CVS and a Rite Aid and a Walgreens all around everywhere. And McDonald's too, man. There's always a McDonald's somewhere right around the corner. So give me a break, man. This whole bullshit that you're talking about, you just don't like marijuana. You know what is on every corner in Detroit? A fucking church. So it's probably, once again, there you go. It's these church people that are, and I'm pretty sure Tate's one of those. Cushenberry, who was also a no vote against the ordinance in October 2015, says he believes it deserved a second look. All of it may be unconstitutional and a violation of federal constitution and the FCC and a restraint on trade because it interferes with interstate commerce, Cushenberry said. In addition to that, you can't treat one set of pharmacies one way and another set the other way. If you're going to say it's medicine, then people need to be able to have a pharmacy. You can't have a pharmacy like CVS and tell everybody else that their pharmacy can't be there. Now that's more like it. And you should have one of these pharmacies in every damn neighborhood. No one should have to be able to, have to drive a car to go get medical marijuana. It should just be in walking distance, especially if you live in the city. All right, there's a story that kind of got by me last year that I guess I'm going to touch upon it a little bit here because I've seen a re-emergence of rhetoric about it coming through on, quite frankly, on the internet, on Facebook. People are talking about it, and it's Monsanto. Bayer taking over marijuana. Is it happening? Is this a conspiracy theory? Is this more of that fake news that we had earlier? No, this ain't fake news. This is real shit. This is real shit. Monsanto was purchased by Bayer, $66 billion. That's not no chump change. This here is the original article, I think, that sparked it all, This is the one everybody refers back to. It's from naturalnews.com. And, written by Samantha Debbie. And over at the Cannabis, we've had Elisa Wallace, who's been covering it, pretty consistently. Okay, there's a lot of comments. That's not the one I thought it was. But anyway, Elisa Wallace, one of my favorite writers over at the Cannabis, has been on the story every step of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and read the summary article. And, I'm not late to the game on this. I just never really, seen, the moment where you're just like, okay, that's it right there. That's where they really made a move where it looks like they're trying to do this takeover shit. I never seen something that just jumped out at me like that. Like, oh, there it is, nail in the coffin. It's hopeless. They're gonna get it. They're taking it over. But now that they've done a whole bunch of shit between 2015 and now, you can start to see it's like the old Polaroid picture developing. You can just see it kind of slowly fading in, and then you can see what the future looks like after it comes in. So following months of negotiation with various offers, German-based Bayer finally sealed the deal with Monsanto, purchasing the seed giant for $66 billion. It's the largest all-cash deal on record. Purchase means a lot of things, and none of them are good for consumers. One, it would strengthen the monopolization of the world's food supply. It also means genetically modified organisms and chemicals to be doused on them everywhere. Now, some are predicting the merge could also mean a takeover of the marijuana industry. Monsanto has an intimate business relationship with the Scott's Miracle-Gro, a convicted corporate criminal, and Scott's Miracle-Gro is trying to take over the marijuana industry, according to Big Bud's Mag. Scott's Miracle-Gro has looked to capitalize on the expanding pot industry in the states where the plant has been legalized or decriminalized. The company's CEO, Jim Hagedorn, stated his intention to spend up to $500 million to completely buy out the marijuana industry. I mean, I'm sure he didn't use the word buy out the whole industry. But anyway, Scott's Miracle-Gro Front Group has already purchased General Hydroponics, Botanicare, and Gavita. Now, General Hydroponics is one of the biggest manufacturers of hydroponic chemicals used to grow weed without dirt. And Botanicare is also another big hydroponic maker of nutrients and whatnot. And Gavita is a light company. Botanicare makes a wide variety of like medium and just all kinds of shit. So major hydroponic nutrients, lighting, soil, and other grow equipment manufacturers report they've also been offered takeover bids by Scott's Miracle-Gro or its Hawthorne Front Company. Maximum Yield magazine, which bans marijuana hydroponics nutrients company Advanced Nutrients from its indoor gardening expo events, welcomed a Monsanto affiliate into its Boston Gardening Expo several years ago. Bayer is, of course, playing a role in this planned monopolization as well. German chemical company does business with GW Pharmaceuticals, a company based in the United Kingdom that grows cannabis and produces medicine from its compounds. Monsanto and Bayer share information on how to genetically engineer cannabis. Bayer sells some of GW Pharmaceuticals' products, including Sativex, a costly medical cannabis spray that's reported to work less effectively than normally grown pot. Both Monsanto and Bayer have a history of producing chemical weapons used in war and toxic products, including PCBs, DDT, Agent Orange, Roundup, and GMOs. Members of the cannabis industry have seen the writing on the wall in terms of the world's seed monopolies interested in marijuana. Michael Straumitis, founder and owner of hydroponics nutrients company Advanced Nutrients, has constantly warned the marijuana community about Monsanto, Scott's Miracle-Gro, GMO marijuana, and the corporate takeover of the marijuana industry. Okay, so if he rightfully so, he has been talking about this for a while, but he's I don't know. Anyway, the two corporations, which have now merged into one, have agreed to share trade secrets about how plans to produce genetically modified marijuana. I mean, don't get me wrong, man. I got this guy, Michael Straumitis, is like friends on my Facebook or whatever. I kind of like to pay attention to what he says and does sometimes. So Monsanto investor George Soros attempts to legalize pot in Uruguay. This must be an old article. Yes, it is. Back in 2016, before that happened. But yeah, they have legalized, and it's like you'll see what they're about to say. But all right, we'll just read this first. Bayer is patented with GW Pharmaceuticals, which grows its own proprietary marijuana genetics. You can bet Monsanto and Bayer are interested in creating GMO marijuana, said Stramitis. Billionaire investor George Soros previously waged a campaign to legalize pot in Uruguay so that he can invest in the plant. Soros owns 500,000 shares of Monsanto stock. Stramitis says South American governmental insiders report that Monsanto is working there on genetically modified cannabis along with pharmaceuticalizing THC, other cannabinoids, and terpenoids. And the funny part about that is in Uruguay, the legal marijuana, that they'll just dole it out to you at the state-run pharmacies. So I'm guessing that that's what this weed is that they're doing that with, is the Monsanto weed. The hydroponic nutrients owner warns that if the biotech giants get involved in the cannabis industry, they'll monopolize it the same way they have the seed, medicine, and agricultural chemical industries. Quote, these corporations have reduced the variety and availability of native seeds. Check. They genetically modify crops so farmers have to buy new seeds every year. Check. And they use corporate chemicals like Roundup to grow them. Check. But they do the same thing with they would do the same thing with GMO marijuana, said Stratomatis. But the thing about it is, how are they going to reduce the variety and availability of native seeds when 10 million growers want to make new strains and it's not that hard to do? We can also just produce seeds. I mean, producing cannabis seeds is not that hard to do. So I'm a little skeptical about any of this being some kind of takeover. Are they going to get in the industry and get heavily involved and make untold billions? Probably. But one of the things that, the grassroots people that had to, the pioneers that had to do this while it's transitioning or before when it was totally illegal, one of the things that these kind of people are always thinking of is, where are you going to let us fit into the new world where this shit ain't illegal and this shit, you don't go to prison for life for growing it? Where do we get to fit in? Like the Rastafarians are asking in Jamaica, where do we get to fit in? Or are you just going to arrest all of us, come in with your corporate minions, and take it all over in a corporate way? I mean, look at this grow operation right here. I don't know. This is just some stock photo or whatever, but, that's crazy right there. Look at the amount of lights that we're talking about here. Just unbelievable amount of lights. So one of the updates that Alicia did on that story, which came out last October, I believe, but this is in November of 2016. Now you want to talk about the scary Monsanto-y part of it. Here you go. Scott's Miracle-Gro's $500 million push into the marijuana industry has a new twist. The lawn and garden giant wants to corner the market on cannabis pesticides. Scott CEO Jim Hagedorn told investors and analysts during the company's fourth quarter earnings call that his firm is talking with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency about pesticide products that could be used on cannabis, according to reports out of the Columbus Dispatch and the Columbus Business Journal. Well, now you got to talk to Scott Pruitt about that. So maybe he's changed his tune now that he's the head of the EPA. But last I heard, he was totally a prohibitionist. The EPA regulates the use of pesticides throughout the nation. However, as marijuana remains federally illegal, currently no products registered with the agency are labeled for use on cannabis, and little guidance has been offered to legalize states. Colorado officials have wrangled on how to regulate pesticides in marijuana and crack down on companies that use pesticides that are banned by the Colorado Department of Agriculture for cannabis. In an earnings transcript posted by Seeking Alpha, Hagedorn cited pesticides as one of the several market opportunities in hydroponics. Quote, we continue working with both individual states and the EPA for the first time ever, registrations that allow pesticidal products to be used on, and will be the only one offering pesticidal products that can be used on cannabis. So I think that's an opportunity for us. So let me get this right. You're going to the EPA and you're saying, we're going to be able to make this pesticide, and the EPA is going to say that we're the only one that's going to be able to make this shit. Yeah. You guys are scary. If you think that sounded pretty scary, what about this? If you look at what we're really trying to create, it's fertilizers and growing medium, lighting, sort of hydroponic plastic systems to some extent, precision irrigation, which is sort of an element or an offshoot to sort of hydroponics, but it's drip systems for use. Okay. I think he just stumbled into a grow room and had a bunch of notes jotted down, and he just kind of read them like blah, 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 blah. But I think within where the law is today, at least for us as a national public company, I think nutrients lighting, we're looking at potentially filling out with a little more lighting, especially on the mid-tier side, plastic, pesticides, irrigation, hydro systems, and more. Some products that would be used in the greenhouse for control of the temperature and sort of humidity in air. Just movement in general. Yeah, you mean fans and cooling units and heaters. If I never mentioned it, yeah, they spent $130 million to buy General Hydroponics. Scott's calculated moves to build a business on the ancillary side of the cannabis industry could set the stage for, large traditional firms to enter the space, analysts have said. Scott's venture into legal cannabis is housed within its Hawthorne Gardening Company subsidiary led by Hagedorn's son Chris. Tom Knox, who covers Scott's for Columbus Business Journal, reported that Hawthorne is contributing to Scott's overall revenue growth, which landed at $2.84 billion for fiscal year 2016. Sales as one of its business segments grew 70% in its most recent quarter, for example, to $87.2 million, mostly because of Hawthorne, which is run by Hagedorn's son, Chris Hagedorn. Chris Hagedorn has an important meeting next week with what his father calls his warlords to plan out the subsidiary future, Jim Hagedorn said. I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes out of it, because I think it is where very experienced hydro people are going to get together and say, what do we need to do over the next 2 or 3 years to fully exploit these investments, Hagedorn said. And there's Chris Hagedorn of Hawthorne, which is the front company that's doing all this purchasing of all these other hydroponic companies. So there you have it, guys. It does look, in fact, like a Monsanto / Bayer / we might as well just say Monsanto is just another little thing that they're just going to try to hide from you. So under the big banner of Bayer. You know, they're making products. I mean, you can see the vision. They're making products like Sativex. I'm sure they will want to make pills, and they'll just want to make any kind of thing except for smokable, regular, everyday plants that you could smoke. Because in the end, they don't want that. They want to extract all the cannabinoids out of the plant, throw the plant material into the furnace, and continue growing shit with chemicals. So NFL Commissioner Roger Goodall. I already did this. I swear to God. Yeah, we already did that story. I guess that takes us to the last of the stories, and that is about how good people smoke marijuana. And in this case, it's a congressman who basically admits using cannabis while in office. For more than a year, U.S. Rep. Dana Rohrabacher, remember the guy from the Rohrabacher Fire Amendment? Costa Mesa Republican, says he took 2 ibuprofen nightly to deal with severe arthritis. 4 hours later, restless in pain, he would wake and take more medicine. And as you might have seen a video I did not too long ago, that's more dangerous than smoking weed for pain. Just taking ibuprofens or aspirin. It's killing your insides. Then during a speaking stop at a San Bernardino marijuana festival and trade show, he discovered a cannabis-infused wax that is supposed to relieve pain. The Republican congressman said he decided 2 weeks ago to skip ibuprofen and give it a try. Topical treatment didn't make him high, he said, but it eased his pain. Quote, I put it on my arm, and I slept through the whole night, he told the Register in an interview on Wednesday. He's been using the wax since, and he said absolutely intends to continue doing so. It's not uncommon for legislators to admit to using pot in their youth, but Rohrabacher is the first sitting U.S. congressman in at least several decades to acknowledge being a cannabis consumer while in office. Alan St. Pierre, executive director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, told Russ Bellevue of Cannabis Radio, which first reported Rohrabacher's admission. And I commend you, Russ, for all your work. The coastal Orange County lawmaker has been a leading conservative champion of relaxing penalties on marijuana use in Orange County, California, and nationally. He pushed for a federal policy that prevents the Department of Justice from interfering with state laws permitting medical marijuana. And in April, he endorsed the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, which is an initiative headed for the November ballot that would legalize cannabis use in California. Yeah, this is a really old article, by the way. He previously admitted pot use as a young adult, but until a couple weeks ago, he said, I haven't touched anything to do with cannabis or marijuana since I was 23 years old. Medical marijuana is legal in California, but remains illegal in the United States under U.S. statutes. The DEA considers marijuana to have no currently accepted medical use, ranking it alongside heroin as a Schedule I. This designation is at odds with the growing body of research that suggests marijuana can be effective in treating chronic pain, muscle stiffness, and other ailments. What gets me is that we have other people suffering the same kind of pain that I've been suffering, Rohrabacher said. The veterans have to live with their pain because under the Veterans Administration, they're not permitted to use medical marijuana. Well, all that might change sometime pretty soon. He was introduced into the pain relief wax in April at the High Times Cannabis Cup Festival in the Inland Empire. A vendor showed him a candle infused with cannabis, explaining he could melt it and rub the liquid on the area that's hurting. Rohrabacher said he wasn't expecting much when he tried it, but was quickly convinced. He said he hadn't planned to disclose the cannabis use when he attended the normal event Tuesday in Washington, D.C. A lot of other people strategize about every word they speak in public, he said. I usually say what's in my heart and soul. Rohrabacher said he doesn't have a doctor's recommendation for medical marijuana use, a provision of California law that has been loosely enforced, particularly when it comes to medical marijuana products that do not get patients high. Rohrabacher said he hopes the requirements will soon be eliminated and give adults easier access to cannabis. Like I said, this is an old article. We haven't seen the actual, hyped up marijuana sales kick off in California where it's just like boom, 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 making billions of dollars player. That hasn't happened yet, but it is legal. They did pass that. So if Congress could cast a secret ballot, Rohrabacher said he's convinced more lenient marijuana policies would pass. But he said too many legislators are worried about how opponents might use it against them. Even now, as we speak, those tides are churning, and public sentiment is heading in our direction. And it's because of people like this guy here that's in the government fighting for us sometimes. He's always out there like making a statement or in the cannabis caucus. So there's a good guy that smokes weed. Well, he didn't say he smoked weed. He said he uses some kind of a ointment that don't even get you high. But whatever, it's medical marijuana and it works, and he's good enough for admitting it. And I mean, as a Republican, you can't expect the admission to be much more than that. So that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in to the weekly podcast. This one is number 15. And wow, what a lot of crazy shit going on in the world of weed. I guess let me just summarize. Just off the top of my head, we had, let me just go down the list. Mainly, we are looking at the Sessions thing, and that's just, it's crazy. I think we're going to see more developments on that very soon, because it really is like, this really was the nail in the coffin for Sessions' little crackdown. And we're going to get people from both sides. We're going to get some people doing some celebration and people being cautious. Like, hey, we got to we got to use this opportunity to push our side forward. Because this is a battle. And the front line is always pushing one way or the other. Someone's always going to be on the cutting edge of either winning or losing the battle. But we're making more progress, and progress can be made no matter what the government outlook is, because, we got people always talking about Democrats or, they're the way we're going to get this shit legalized and blah, blah, blah. I wish I could say, yeah, I believe you, but I haven't seen it in my lifetime, man. I can't point to any Democrat and be like, that guy legalized marijuana somewhere. It just doesn't happen like that. People become in the party and they become party loyalists, and Democrats and Republicans both. Once they do that, then they can't go on the record supporting taking cannabis out of the CSA, because these parties are run by their donors, and their donors are the very companies that that think that if they legalize marijuana, it's going to hurt their bottom line. And these corporations range from, big tobacco to alcohol, for some reason, Discount Tire, pharmaceutical people, whether it be drugstores all the way to actual pharmaceutical corporations that manufacture deadly fentanyl. So it's a wide range of people. And that's where we're at. The lobbies that want to make marijuana illegal are the people that donate the most money to the politicians that write the laws. You wonder why cannabis is still a Schedule I drug in the Controlled Substances Act. That's why, man. And Trey Gowdy and that other guy, Conley, whatever, they might not be trying to legalize marijuana, but that was a pretty good way to expose the drug war as a complete fraud. My name's Brando, and this has been the weekly podcast. Come back next time.